Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I am back with Dr. Chris Jones, the executive director of VASCD, which is changing their name. But that is a new conversation for a new day. We are continuing to co-host these segments around just our thoughts, our opinions about things that are going on in schools with instructional coaching, instructional leadership. And what's awesome about these segments is sometimes we agree and we can like share really great tips, tricks, examples, and sometimes we disagree, which is also awesome because we're out to like really show folks like often there's not one right answer, right? And so there's lots of ways of doing things, and two highly informed, highly educated people can disagree and both be highly effective. So, Chris, I'm excited to talk with you today.
I am excited to talk with you today as well, Becca. I appreciate it.
I have to like shift out of hosting mode and
I'm the
into co-hosting
co-host
mode.
and not the co.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm like,
so it is super
welcome.
weird too, because we've got a podcast channel too,
Yeah.
and like being a host or being a guest is what I'm used to, but having a partnership where we share the role of not just facilitating but also sharing, uh, we'll figure it out at some point.
We will. Yeah, both of us are shifting into co-hosting, so it's awesome. Yeah, I love this. So, and these segments for those folks that are just kind of starting to listen to these segments, these are much more informal segments. They're really a conversation between two professionals. Both of us go out into schools, consult with coaches and leaders very often. Yeah, and just apply all this stuff. So today, Chris and I were previously talking about the ladder of conscious competence, um, and how it really speaks to a pain point with, I think, especially instructional coaches. And I'm actually curious what you think about with school leaders as well. How it shows up with them. But first, let's share with everyone what is this ladder, and then what are our opinions about it. Do you want to share,
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I think so. When we first started talking about this, before we said, let's stop talking about it so that we can record it as a
Share.
raw and authentic conversation, not as something that we try to recreate. We, I didn't make the connection, and perhaps you already had the connection in your head, and you were like, let's see what Chris thinks before I drop the unconscious, conscious, incompetent, competent matrix on him. And so that's what it is. And I think you can drop that in the show notes, can't you?
Yeah,
Like
I
the
can.
graphic that
Hmm.
so, the difference between somebody who's consciously competent, meaning I know, um, I know that I do these things well that allow me to be successful. That's
Hmm.
conscious competence. Conscious incompetence is the same exact thing, except for I know that I don't know. I know
Hmm.
that I don't have the skills needed to be successful in a certain domain. And then there's the dangerous side, and that's somebody who's either unconsciously incompetent, which means they have no idea, they are just not good, and they don't know they're not good, or unconsciously competent, which means they are really, really good, but they don't know why. They can't
Yes.
identify the skills. It doesn't maybe translate into other situations and contexts. And for the nature of our conversation, that would be the potential roadblock, obstacle, or workaround that
Hmm.
some of our highest quality teachers might experience when they transition into the role of coach or the role of school leader. And that's, you know, somebody who's really, really good, but they don't know why. And so helping others understand what it takes to get that level of competence, there might be a little friction because,
Hmm.
well, I don't know why.
Hmm.
I just do it. It just comes
Yeah.
natural to me.
Yeah. So the unconscious competence. So this is what's interesting. Yeah, when you Google this ladder, really a lot of the framing around this ladder is that the goal is unconscious competence because people are calling it mastery because it becomes second nature. I don't have to consciously think about what I'm doing. It just happens, right? So often I was talking to another colleague because she's like, that's the goal. We want people to be unconsciously competent. And you and I agree on this that like it's actually isn't the goal, right? And I can be with both and, right? We actually do want things to become second nature for our teachers, right? To develop habits. Ooh, I'd love to do another episode on like habits in itself. Ooh, that'd be awesome. Oh, I love talking about habits. But um, right, we actually do want our teachers to get to that high level of mastery. And the danger for coaches and leaders to have, different areas, unconscious competence when they're working with teachers is that often they have a hard time explaining to someone who doesn't know how to do it, how to do it. And what I find is kind of a crutch or like just a way in the absence of knowing how to show a teacher how to do something, there's a lot like there can be blame. There can be like, oh, they should know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it also gets to the point where, like, I think there's a lot of things that come into that, like imposter syndrome, or why can't I make a difference, or why am I struggling to help teachers understand like a good classroom management structure and the things that come with classroom management, or why am I able to engage my students in deeper learning and to really get them thinking and talking with each other and demonstrating their level of expertise because I was able to do that. I don't know if I agree that unconsciously competent is a good thing ever. Just as a
Mm.
strategic thinker, as somebody who relies heavily on strategy, knowing why something was effective or ineffective allows me to be able to make decisions and to transfer into other contexts. As teachers, we get a new batch of children every single year. And so, what might have worked 2 years ago with a certain group of students is not working. So why is it not working? Well, if I understand why something did work, well, this is what I did, but these students have a different level of, prerequisite knowledge or whatever, being able to really dissect, having moving into that consciously competent. But for the nature of our conversation, like if I'm attempting to coach somebody in a way that is leading to the mastery of some kind of skill, then me not knowing what the actual skill is or what makes it an effective skill or what makes
Mhm.
it a best practice, not always the best practice, but a best practice, is can be, I won't say that can be harmful, but it can lead to kind of getting stuck or this idea of a glass ceiling. And so when you asked me about that, the first thing I thought of was like Michael Jordan. And I know it's like a one of one thing, but I wonder why Michael Jordan never coached basketball, the greatest
Mhm.
basketball player of all time.
Mhm.
Why did he not coach? Or if he attempted to coach, why was he not successful? Like Magic Johnson, he was my guy in the Jordan era. Right before the Jordan era, I'm a Lakers fan. Magic Johnson was my guy. Magic Johnson did not experience success as a coach. I don't know if it's because he couldn't coach the skill set that he had, the unconscious competence. Same thing with Michael Jordan. I don't know if why Michael Jordan either didn't coach or if he didn't have the level of success that I would know that Michael Jordan was a coach at some point. And I have to assume, I've got no research, there's no data for me to pull on this. This is just my own internal theory, is that those that are who are so uniquely gifted
Mhm.
have a
Mhm.
hard time helping others understand their gift.
Yeah.
And so that's when we really started talking and getting into this idea of unconsciously competent.
So I have a question for you. What's one of those for you that you're just like kind of naturally gifted at and you have a hard time teaching other people how to do?
So I get stuck on classroom management. So when and it's why I always get to it. Why when folks ask me like routines, procedures, expectations, I build commitment. We've got that one podcast episode where we talked about commitment. I
Commitment,
build
yeah.
commitment to expectations with my students the same way in which as a leader, I build a shared vision. So I get feedback from students, I get input. We build the expectations,
Mm.
and then we talk about how we're going to hold each other accountable to those expectations when we're not meeting them. And so that level of commitment to the expectations just seems like something that comes natural to me. But I
Yeah.
can explain that to, like, okay, you take them through an exercise where you ask them, how do
Yeah.
they want to be treated? What do they want their classroom to look like? How do they need to have, what's the environment need to look, feel, and sound like in order for them to be successful? You build that out, and then you negotiate consequences
Yeah.
and how we're going to be held accountable. So that's like step one. But I never, I mean, now granted, I was a high school math teacher. I had very limited routines and procedures that I could say, this is my routine for this, and this is my procedure. Like that is
Right.
needed. That is needed pre-K through 5, right? And it's
Yeah.
a little bit more in middle school, but at high school, you can start to kind of release those things. But I leaned on two things. I spent my time and energy building relationships with the students,
Mhm.
knowing that, helping them understand that I loved them, that I cared for them, and that I had their best interest in mind, and that I knew them. I saw them, I knew them as human beings first, students second. And then I spent the chunk of my time like thinking about how I could best engage the students whom I knew and whom I had in front of me, how I could best engage them in their learning based on where it is that we needed to go that day and how they were entering in to that classroom. So engagement and relationships were my classroom management strategy. I had a difficult time in helping, and I still do, coaching classroom management. I can say, well, it's clear you don't have routines and procedures. It's
Right.
clear that you're not, like, I could tell you what the problem is, but I can't develop the solutions because I relied on two things:
Mm.
relationships and engagement. I didn't rely on, I need to see a cross R when you need to go to the restroom, and
Right. Right. Didn't know
this when you need to go sharpen your pencil, or
that.
this right here if you need to go charge your like, I didn't have that stuff. So there's
Okay.
that's an example of when, as a teacher, how I am unconsciously competent.
Competent. It's so great. Mine's actually very similar. Mine is teaching SEL and then related also to classroom building classroom culture. I liked to joke when I was a teacher that I put the cult in culture. My classroom was so tight that my kids almost spoke a different language, like with each other. We just were like in it to win it together, and we had classroom meeting. And what's funny was I actually ran professional developments for my school on it. And like somehow like it didn't quite click for everyone else. I'm like, this is how I do it. And somehow the way I did it, it just didn't always transfer to other classrooms. And it was just so intuitive for me. And over the years, right? Like I've like tried to help teachers develop it to that level, and I can totally coach teachers around like the facts and the activities, but there's something around for me like my way of being and my mindsets that made it intuitive and like wildly effective, where it I haven't like like got my hands around completely like how to get someone else to do it. um so I think anyway, I appreciate you sharing about like how you're unconsciously competent. It made me think about this concept called the Peter Principle, where
That is.
you don't know what that is. Okay, I for some reason thought we'd talked about it. Okay, I like you like how I tossed it out. I'm like, does he have we
We're
talked
about to
about it?
find out.
We're
We're about
gonna
to
find out
find
now.
out.
So the Peter Principle is a pretty common leadership concept known in general organizational leadership stuff. And this is what it is. It's named after Peter Drucker. And he essentially described the concept that folks get promoted out of their skill set.
Mm,
And so what we see in schools is someone is typically a fantastic teacher of children. And then it's not necessarily a promotion, but they apply to become a coach and become a coach. And the skill set that got them there, teaching children, is no longer the skill set they need. The primary skill set a coach needs is not teaching children. It is working with adults. It's adult learning, right? And that is a skill set that needs to be developed and is often wildly overlooked and underfunded, because the assumption is, oh, you knew how to teach children, now you can teach other teachers how to do that as well. And it's like, that's not the skill set. And you can see this in other industries too, like the medical industry, nurses, like nursing. I read a lot of medical research because nursing and nurse management is parallel to teachers and instructional coaching. And it's the same exact thing. Nurses become nurse managers and are no longer taking care of sick people. They're managing other nurses
Right.
and like don't know how to do that effectively.
Yeah. I think so. So two things. One, I mean, I think yes, I get it, and I agree. And I think that there is something powerful about a coach who understands deeply how the brain learns and instruction that is needed to maximize and capitalize on how the brain learns. So I think from a strategic plan standpoint, I think that's important. And I also think that's why those who are unconsciously competent struggle to make that leap. But I think those who are consciously competent with certain things can absolutely make that jump and make that leap. One thing you said that I know it's not our topic, but I want to say it out loud. I think, you know, it's one thing to coach and keep the coaching in the skill and not in the disposition. And so what I mean by that is if I'm a coach at any time and my strategy is to coach that person into becoming me, that's a
Hmm.
mistake.
Yeah, it's a huge
You know what I
mistake. Hmm.
because if regardless, like if our dispositions, if our personalities, if our way of being are completely different, then no. Like let's lean into and maximize your strengths and who you are as opposed to trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Like let's lean into who you are. Like who you are, let's take that, your disposition, your personality, and how you show up in the world, and let's tack on strategies to that as opposed to let's not talk about strategy, let's talk about how you can be more energetic and teach with more zest. Like no, it's not me. I'm
Hmm.
introverted, I'm low key, I'm very like boom. So I was having this conversation just the other day, the difference between a teacher who has a loose structure and very fluid learning environment
Hmm.
versus someone who wants to coach them into a structured, rigid routine. It's like, no,
Hmm.
that teacher probably their classroom and their home probably look exactly the same. So you
Yes.
trying to change an individual, like
Hmm.
who they be and
Yeah.
who they are and how they
Yes.
operate, you no,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to work. So I wanted to say out loud, just for us and anybody who's listening, and maybe that's the title of the podcast is anybody
Is
even
anyone
listening?
listening?
So like a caution to coaches, and whether you know this or not, or you're a new coach, like don't coach a person into being you.
Being you. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's where phenomenal coaching skills are come in, right? Because
Yes.
it's like it's often, this is what I did in the classroom. And I like to say there's two things that are slightly unrelated, but I want to say both of them. One is I think a huge mistake that I see coaches do is share relatable stories about when they were in the classroom. Well, when I was in the classroom, I blah blah blah. No, stop doing that. People don't want to hear how good of a teacher you were as a coach. So I'm just gonna like get on my soapbox right now. And it doesn't build trust. Folks, when we're looking to build our own credibility with teachers, which is important in building trust, we sharing a story about how good you are as a teacher is not the way. It's we build trust by actually helping teachers produce their own results in classrooms.
Yeah.
And I
Is the
see as
same is the same true for talking about the mistakes you made in the classroom?
I don't think so. No, I don't think
I
the
think
same is
that's
true.
different, right?
Yeah, I
Like,
think it's
man,
different.
I
Yeah.
remember when I screwed that up. Like, I think teachers
Yes.
appreciate, like,
Yes.
yes, okay,
Yeah. All right. So that was one thing. I wanted to share. And then the other thing, okay. So we're talking about, so I talked about the Peter principle, right? And you said, well, and I was highlighting the importance of learning adult learning, right? And then you're like, well, people also need like this foundation of like good pedagogy, right? And you and I have talked about this too.
yeah,
So there are three different types of skills that we need. When I was getting my master's, I learned about this, like very kind of academic. There's three different types of skills, but depending on what, I don't know, level in an organization, you actually need different amounts of these skills. So the three skills are technical skills, conceptual skills, and human skills. So technical skills is like content knowledge.
Yeah. How to do this.
Conceptual skills is how you do it, how like pedagogy, how you
Oh,
teach.
I got you.
And then human skills is, yeah, interaction, relationships, right? What's our ability to influence others, right? So when this is what's in classrooms, teachers need a super high level of technical and conceptual skills. And then potentially lower. And I'm not saying we teachers need all of them, and I'm
Yeah,
not saying
don't
teachers don't.
step in
I
it.
know, I
Don't
know, I
step
know.
in it because
So
that
I know.
last one
So
is the most important.
but listen, this is my point. This is my point that and this is about this these three skills when they did all this research wasn't just education, right? So we're just kind of
Yeah.
looking at the effectiveness of workers, I guess, in organizations, right? Instructional coaches it's the level of technical and conceptual skills need to be as much as the human skills. So when you see those kind of middle managers in the organizational speak, but those middle managers need a high level of all three,
Yeah.
where the folks I hate to say lower level, but I don't know any other word right now. But like the folks kind of in the front lines doing the work need that super high level of technical and conceptual. And I think just those human skills get overlooked because I think like often I see like coaches were typically excellent at teaching reading and math, or whatever. And so I see them in Facebook groups, I see them around, and they're like getting all this extra professional development and learning even more about math because I'm a math coach and I just need to know everything there is about math instruction. Yes, and you also need an equal amount of professional development with those human skills, learning
Yeah.
how to grow and influence other humans.
Well, I think, and I know we're over the 20 minutes we wanted to allocate, but I think, and this could be another topic, because this is the thing that I think about the most when it comes to coaching, developing the skills to coach versus developing the skills to help people become better teachers, like through a lens without a paradigm that allows it. So what you just talked about with the math coach getting more around the math,
Hmm.
I, I don't think you need that. I
Hmm.
mean, maybe you do because it depends on your paradigm for coaching, but the paradigm for coaching as an instructional leader or as an instructional coach, both are the same to me. Even if at the end of the year, the coach doesn't have to worry about the appraisal, but the school leader has to be the one who says whether or not somebody's effective across 8 domains. But that approach means I don't have to be a content expert. I've got to know how to look at and analyze the content alongside the teacher.
Yes.
But the more I know, I don't know if that helps me more, but if I were to take that time and investment and actually develop my skills to become an
Mhm.
expert observer and collector of data, an expert asker of questions, is that all right?
Mhm.
Is that okay for me
Yes,
to
that's
say?
fantastic.
And then an expert listener, that's a very different skill set because the best coaches do not come with the solutions, they come with the best questions.
Yes, I love that. Um, yes, okay. So we're going to wrap up this
Did that last like, I don't
conversation.
know, 15 minutes even have anything to do with unconsciously competent?
Yes, it was mildly related. Yes.
Well,
So
I
the
think
wrap
that's it.
up.
So let me say it, and then you could be the one to say the last word. Is that whether or not you're conscious or unconscious about your level of competence, we can always engage with furthering our potential and our skill set around effective coaching, which to me would be those three things. And we don't all have to agree. But what coaching is and looks like is very paradigm it's nuanced.
Mhm.
And so I would say that there's a skill set that exists that help you move from unconscious to conscious so that you can help
Yes.
better support teachers and the problems that you're co-identifying.
Right. And my nicknames for the different levels, starting with unconscious, incompetent, as I don't know that I don't know. And then you go on conscious, incompetent. So I know that I don't know, and I could ask for help potentially. And then we have conscious competence. I know that I know. And then unconscious competence is I don't know that how I know,
Yeah.
how I know how to do it. Right. So yeah, all this can be developed. So I love it. This is really great. All right. Thank you so much. This was an awesome conversation, and I hope folks listening got something out of it. And we will see folks next time.